Most urban legends are the stuff of fiction. That is, until they aren't. If you don't have a strong stomach, you might want to rethink your choices, because I'll be looking at corpses found hidden under hotel beds and cold-blooded reptiles lurking in city sewers. And then there's the terrifying case of a family murdered by someone who had been living in their attic. And remember that tanning bed scene in Final Destination? Yeah, I'm going there. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 urban legends that turned out to be true. 25. The corpse under the bed. We've all heard some version of this nightmare. Hotel guest checks in, settles down, and soon starts complaining about a strange smell. The source? A body hidden under the bed or stuffed inside the mattress. That sounds too wild to be real, right? Well, believe it or not, this urban legend has actually happened multiple times. There have been reports from cities like Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and Kansas City where unsuspecting guests unknowingly slept just above decomposing bodies. In fact, one of the most infamous cases took place in 1999 when a German couple in Atlantic City spent the night with a corpse hidden in the box spring beneath them. 24. The Leaping Lawyer. Have you heard the one about the lawyer who tried to show off by running full speed into a window to prove how strong it was, only for the window to come out and send him tumbling to his death? In 1993, Gary Hoy, a lawyer in Toronto, lost his life after demonstrating the strength of his office's glass windows by throwing himself against one. The glass didn't shatter, but the window frame gave way, and Hoy fell from the 24th floor. 23. Murderers entering apartments via medicine cabinets. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but this urban legend turned out to be all too real. The legend goes that in certain apartment buildings, murderers could sneak into your home by crawling through the medicine cabinet. While that might seem absurd at first, a disturbing case from 80s Chicago proved this horrifyingly true. A man used a tunnel-like gap between two apartment walls to crawl through a connected medicine cabinet and commit murder. The incident was so terrifying, it inspired multiple horror films, including Candyman. 22. The Case of the Familiar Cadaver. There's an urban legend about a medical student who walked into class only to realize they were about to dissect a relative. That's grim, right? In 1982, a medical student recognized one of the cadavers as her great-aunt during a dissection seminar. According to a letter published by two staff members, the student informed the director of her suspicion before the second lab session. It was confirmed that the cadaver was, in fact, her great-aunt, and the body was immediately removed from the class to avoid further distress. Strangely enough, the student and her great-aunt had once discussed the merits of body donation to science, but discovering her relative on the dissection table was a shock no one could have prepared for. 21. The Body in the Chimney. It's a creepy sleepover story. People hear strange noises coming from the chimney and think it's an animal, and a few days later, a foul smell fills the house. And since I'm on urban legends, yes, it's always the body of a would-be robber or thief that got stuck. Well, the terrible story turned out to be all too real in 1984 when a man named Joseph Schexnayder was found wedged in the chimney of a Louisiana bank 27 years after he went missing. As there were no signs of injuries or foul play, authorities believe he tried to enter the building through the chimney, got stuck, and ultimately died there. 20. The Green Man, or Charlie No-Face. If you're from western Pennsylvania, you probably know the story of Charlie No-Face, or the Green Man. Rumor has it, he's a faceless figure who roams dark back roads and tunnels, appearing only at night. Some say he glows faintly, while others claim he'll even accept a ride if you're brave enough to stop. This one's actually true. Well, sort of. The legend is based on Raymond Robinson, who was disfigured in a 22,000-volt accident as a child, leaving him without a nose, eyes, or lips. He'd take nighttime walks along Route 351 to get some fresh air without all the usual stares, which led to his, let's just say, ghostly reputation. 19. The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. Do you like scary movies? Sorry, I just had to. But in all honesty, we've all seen some version of this on a screen somewhere. A young babysitter is alone, watching TV, when the phone rings. A stranger's voice on the line asks, "Have you checked on the children?" Terrified, she realizes the caller is inside the house. In 1950, 13-year-old Janet Christman was babysitting in Columbia, Missouri when she was attacked. Police found evidence that she had tried to call for help, but she didn't survive. Just 4 years earlier, another Missouri woman, Mary Lou Jenkins, was also strangled while home alone, which added to the legend's grim lore. Over time, these tragic incidents have become the foundation of the babysitter in peril trope, and Hollywood hasn't rested since. 18. The Man in the White Van. The stranger danger talk is practically a childhood rite of passage, with one detail that sticks out: beware the white van. To this day, we regularly hear stories of shady figures in white vans that like to lure kids with candy. But this isn't just a tall tale to scare the kids. It has a horrific basis in reality. From 1970 to 1973, Texas had its own Candyman in Dean Corll, a serial killer and child predator. Corll, who worked at his family's candy company, often offered sweets to local kids. He even drove a white van, and at least 2 of his victims were last seen getting inside. 17. El Hombre del Saco, Spain's Boogeyman. In Spain, parents warn their children about El Hombre del Saco, or the Sack Man, an old man who supposedly carries misbehaving children away in a large sack. Now, while every country in the world has its own version of the Boogeyman, Spain's is based on a real-life crime. In 1910, the infamous crime of Cadaver shook the nation when a young boy was found dead by the roadside, showing brutal head and abdominal injuries. The investigation led to Francisco Leona, a barber who confessed to kidnapping the boy by stuffing him into a sack. He'd been paid handsomely to harvest the boy's blood and organs as a cure for tuberculosis. Leona was sentenced to death by garrote, but died in prison before the execution could be carried out. 16. The Legend of Cropsey. Since I'm on the subject of boogeymen, Staten Island kids grew up with the story of Cropsey, a crazed escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who supposedly lurked in the tunnels under Seaview Hospital, snatching up any child who wandered too far. Parents even used Cropsey to keep their kids in line, warning them to stick to curfew or to go to bed. In the 80s, Andre Rand, a former janitor at Willowbrook State School, was convicted of kidnapping and linked to several missing children. One child's body was even found buried near Willowbrook, a place already infamous for abuse, overcrowding, and horrific conditions. Rand, Staten Island's very own Cropsey, is still in prison today. And if you're enjoying this list, please give it a like, comment, subscribe, do all that. It really helps the algorithm, which helps our channel, and it would mean a lot to me, so thank you so much, guys. 15. The Slavemaster Chain Letter. From the late 90s to the early 2000s, the childhood annoyance of chain letters took on a darker edge. Women across the US began receiving emails warning about an internet user called Slavemaster. According to the letter, Slavemaster had already killed 56 women he met online, and readers were urged to pass the warning to friends to stay safe. In 2000, this warning turned terrifyingly real. John Robinson was arrested after authorities found the bodies of 4 women on his property. Robinson had prowled BDSM forums under the username Slavemaster to lure his victims. Even after Robinson's arrest, the macabre chain letter continued to circulate, leaving behind a disturbing digital legacy. 14. Alligators in the Sewers. There have been stories about alligators living in New York City sewers for decades. According to legend, these alligators feed on rats and pose a danger to sewer workers who supposedly carry guns for protection. It's appeared everywhere, from books to TV shows and movies. New York even celebrates Alligator in the Sewer Day on February 9th. And this is where it gets hairy. In the 30s, then Commissioner of Sewers Teddy May reported sightings of baby alligators, attributing them to pets flushed down storm drains. May launched a campaign to eradicate them and claimed that they were wiped out by 1937. Then, in 2010, authorities captured a 2-foot baby alligator in the Queens sewers, and there are similar stories elsewhere. In 1984, firefighters in Paris rescued an adult Nile crocodile from the sewers beneath Pont Neuf Bridge. Named Eleanor, the crocodile lived at a French aquarium until 2022. 13. The Blue Whale Challenge. Before the Momo Challenge panic swept the internet in 2019, there was an even darker story going around: the Blue Whale Challenge. People said this game started in Russia, leading teens through 50 dangerous tasks over 50 days, with the last one telling them to take their own life. Most thought it was just an urban legend, until a 2015 suicide in Russia was connected to the game. Then in 2016, Philip Budikin stepped forward, claiming he created the Blue Whale Challenge to target vulnerable teens, and he was arrested. Even though no deaths were officially tied to it, and much of the story is unconfirmed, Boogeyman's disturbing online interactions with minors gave this legend a frightening dose of reality. 12. Death by tanning bed. Remember that terrifying tanning bed scene from Final Destination? As wild as it seemed, it has a chilling real-life parallel. In 1989, Patsy Campbell from Indiana became the first recorded person to die from a tanning bed session gone horribly wrong. Patsy was on a medication for psoriasis that made her sensitive to light, but she spent 25 minutes in a tanning bed anyway. Just 2 days later, she developed blisters that turned into severe burns over 70% of her body. The mix of UV rays and medication led to a tragic ending that's more horrifying than any movie. 11. The Bunny Man. Every town has its own creepy stories, and Fairfax County, Virginia is no exception. For years, kids in the area swapped tales about the Bunny Man, a man in a bunny suit who supposedly carried an axe and was responsible for child disappearances and, as legend had it, even a few grisly murders. I mean, that sounds absurd, right? Well, in October 1970, the Washington Post published an article titled "Man in Bunny Suit Sought in Fairfax," after a couple reported a man dressed as a bunny throwing a hatchet at their windshield, angrily accusing them of trespassing. A week later, another couple had a similar encounter. No actual murders, but the axe-wielding bunny man was definitely real and left a lasting impression on Fairfax County. 10. Switzerland's Forest Phantom. For more than a decade, residents around Mall, Switzerland told tales of a strange, silent figure wandering the forest. They called him Le Lion, and he was described as tall and dressed in a gas mask, boiler suit, and camouflage cloak. Everyone who came across him allegedly fled in fear. Then, in 2013, someone finally managed to capture a photograph of the elusive figure, and his existence was confirmed. Shortly afterward, Le Lion's cloak and gas mask were found abandoned in the woods, along with a note titled "Death Certificate of the Ghost of Mall." The message hinted that Le Lion, disturbed by the exposure, had vanished for good. Whether Le Lion was a recluse, an eccentric, or something else, his legend endures. 9. The nightmare origin of the buried alive legends. We've all heard some version of the buried alive legend. A person is declared dead, buried, and later wakes up inside their coffin. When the grave is eventually reopened, they're found dead from suffocation, with mangled fingers and scratch marks on the coffin lid. The story of Octavia Hatcher is behind the origin of this legend. In the late 1800s, Octavia fell ill and slipped into a coma. She was pronounced dead and buried. But days later, others in the area started showing similar symptoms, falling into comas with barely detectable breathing, but the people woke up. Horrified, Octavia's husband had her exhumed, only to find that she had indeed woken up underground. Octavia was discovered with scratches on her face, bloodied fingers, and a torn coffin lining. She was reburied shortly after. 8. The Candlelight Prowler. For years, Australian children were haunted by tales of the Candlelight Prowler, a shadowy figure who would sneak into homes at night, standing silently by children's beds with a candle in hand. Only a few drops of wax on the floor would remain as evidence that he had been there during the night. Then, in 2012, police apprehended Darren James McDonald, charging him with indecent acts against children, aggravated battery, and theft. Investigations revealed that between July and August 2001, McDonald had broken into multiple homes in Ballarat, Australia. In one instance, he attacked 2 young sisters. In another, he used a candle to navigate through a sleeping family's home, leaving behind drops of wax, just like the legend described. 7. The gang initiation / flashing headlights legend. You've probably heard this one before. A driver sees a car approaching without its headlights on and flashes its lights to alert them. But instead of a thank you, the other car makes a U-turn and begins tailing them. When he finally stops, gang members get out and gun him down in a brutal initiation ritual. This urban legend has circulated widely, even making its way into news outlets. But where did it start? Although not gang-related, a tragic incident in Stockton, California might have been the source. In 1992, Kelly Freed died after her driver, Will Fitz, gestured to a car without its lights on. The car's occupants, 16-year-old Adrian Gutierrez and 15-year-old Carlos Ojeda, took offense to the signal. Gutierrez opened fire on Fitz's car, chasing it into a department store parking lot before firing again. That final shot struck Freed, killing her. 6. The real-life playing card killer. Creepypasta fans might recognize the story of the Alice killings, where a killer leaves the name Alice scrawled in blood on a playing card beside each victim. While this story is fiction, a disturbingly similar crime unfolded in real life. In 2003, Alfredo Galán Sotillo brought terror to Madrid, Spain by leaving playing cards next to his victims' bodies. After being called the playing card killer by the media, Sotillo allegedly continued his murders, inspired by the attention the nickname had received. In the end, he eventually turned himself in and confessed that the playing cards were more of an afterthought than a planned signature. 5. The Deadly Wedgie. How many times have we heard this one? I heard about a guy who gave someone such an extreme wedgie that it actually killed him. According to the story, the wedgie is pulled so high that it causes serious trauma, leading to death. But there's a real case behind the tale, and it's just as bizarre. In 2013, an Oklahoma man named Bradley Davis got into a heated argument with his stepfather, Denver St. Clair. To end things, Davis yanked his stepdad's underwear up and over his head in what's known as an atomic wedgie. The elastic band wrapped around Denver's neck, cutting off his airway and causing him to suffocate. Davis pled guilty to manslaughter and received a 30-year prison sentence. 4. The Nightmare Under the Bed. Okay, confess. Have you ever told this one around the campfire? A young girl's dog would lie on the ground next to her bed at night. Whenever she heard a noise, she'd reach over and the dog would lick her hand, reassuring her that everything was fine. But one morning, she found her dog dead, and a chilling message written on her mirror: humans can lick too. Well, let me tell you, the real story is unsettling in a different way. In July 2014, a teenager in Ellesmere Port, England, started receiving texts from a stalker. Over time, the messages got worse, and one night, the man, Kyle Ravenscroft, even told her he was in the house and planned to hang himself outside her window. Understandably terrified, she slept in her mother's room that night. The next morning, she found Ravenscroft hiding under her bed, where he'd apparently slept all night. He was chased out of the house and was later arrested by the authorities. 3. There's someone living in the attic. A family comes home from vacation, only to notice strange things out of place. At first, they brush it off. But soon, odd noises, missing food, and open doors start to add up. Then, someone checks the attic and finds sign of a squatter, a makeshift bed, old food, and maybe a few personal items. They call the authorities, but the intruder is never found. Does that sound familiar? In 1922, Andreas Gruber noticed a set of footprints in the snow that led from the woods to his farmhouse, but didn't go back. Over the following days, he heard strange noises in the attic, found unfamiliar objects, and even noticed a missing set of keys. On March 31st, Andreas, his wife, daughter, grandchildren, and the family maid were brutally murdered. Afterward, authorities discovered that the killer had stayed in the home for days before leaving. Despite a thorough investigation, the murderer was never caught. 2. The Legend of Arizona's Red Ghost. In 1883, two men left their wives at their Arizona ranch to check on the livestock. Around midday, one woman went to the spring while the other stayed with the children. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence, and the woman inside saw a massive, red-furred creature with a demonic figure on its back. She locked herself and the children inside. The woman in the spring never returned. When the men came back, they found her trampled body near the spring next to large hoofprints and tufts of red hair. And thus, the legend of the Red Ghost was born. Over time, more sightings were reported. Rancher Cyrus Hamblin later said that he had seen the creature and that it was actually a camel with a skeleton tied to its back. Not long after, a group of prospectors near the Verde River also spotted the beast and fired at it. They missed, but as the camel bolted, something fell from its back. When they approached, they found a human skull, hair still attached. 9 years later, another rancher finally managed to shoot the camel and discovered evidence that someone had indeed once been strapped to it. 1. Getting stuck together. While it's a scenario I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, penis captivus, yes, it's exactly what you think it is, an incredibly rare and painful condition, has happened several times. During intercourse, intense spasms can cause the vagina to clamp down on the man's penis, making withdrawal painful and nearly impossible. And even though the condition usually only lasts a few seconds, there's no clear scientific explanation for the spasms. Cases are extremely rare, with only a few recorded in medical journals. However, an incident in Nairobi in 2012 sparked waves of sensationalism, suggesting the condition might be much more common than we think. And thankfully, that's it for today. I mean, can you imagine where I might have ended up? If you enjoyed today's list, you'll definitely want to check out the one we did a while back on 25 unbelievable facts that are 100% real. I uncovered some wild stories like the day police arrested a squirrel, JFK's outrageous nights at Bing Crosby's parties, and yes, America's very real spanking squad, which again is exactly what it sounds like. Interested? Just click on this link right here, and I'll catch you next time. Also check out Dark Horse Detectives.